We are the Ministry of the Real Truth, and of late we've come across this particular channel and this particular video where the narrator with a heavy accent, but easy to understand, perhaps he's an African or even a Jamaican, so there's no problem there. The book, the Anacalypsis, supposedly the original scriptures before they were corrupted or changed according to the narrator, and it looks like it's of Persian origin. And here at book 2 chapter 1, we're not going to play the video because we may bring ourselves a copyright infringement or something like that along those lines. And it reads, the ancient Persians of the religion of Abraham, first book of Genesis, disingenuous, can't we see that word, conduct in the translatory of the Bible. Abraham acknowledged more than one God. Did he or did he not? Is that true or is it false? 1. The religion and ancient philosophy of the Chaldeans, or the Chaldee, by whom are meant the Assyrians. Is that correct? Any Assyrians out there? Were they actually Assyrians? Regarded as Assyrians? Because we've heard from Assyrians themselves, they don't want to talk about their history really, but they said, one actually said in particular, carried on angry at them, about them, that they came in and they caused some problems and they were not liked by the Assyrians. They got to the point where they actually couldn't stand them, hated them. We don't know if that's actually true, but again it was coming from a native born Assyrian, or Syrian. The religion and ancient philosophy of the Chaldeans, by whom are meant the Assyrians, given by Stanley at first view, exhibit a scene of the utmost confusion. This may be attributed in part to the circumstance that it is not the history of their religion and philosophy at any one particular area or era, but that it is extended over a space of several thousand years, during which perhaps they might undergo many changes. To this circumstance authors have not paid sufficient attention, so that what may have been accurately described in the time of Herodotus, he's supposed to be the father of all history, especially Greek history, but some top theologians, scholars, etc. like Bart D. Ehrman say, well, he tends to exaggerate a bit, gets his facts wrong. Like Josephus, can't be trusted because someone's copied him or added to it. It's a different style of writing to that of Josephus, etc. So that what may have been accurately described in the time of Herodotus may have been much changed in the time of Porphyry. Thus different authors appear to write in contradiction to each other, though each may have written what was strictly true at the time of which he was writing. Not knowing anything about this, the Anacalypsis, we went online and found information on it. We posed a couple of questions first to this narrator of this video, and no, we didn't go to Wikipedia and get it refunded on a better source. Narrator, this is the question we asked him. What version are you reading from and claiming it the original before it was changed or corrupted? And obviously it's the Anacalypsis. We come to realise that. And we found this information here, which we posted in the comments. The Anacalypsis is a 2-volume book written by Scottish writer and scholar Godfrey Higgins. It was published in 1836 and is considered one of the earliest works in the field of comparative mythology, blending studies of ancient religions, philosophies, and folklore from around the world. The title Anacalypsis is derived or taken from the Greek word meaning unveiling or discovery, which reflects the book's purpose of revealing the hidden connections and similarities between various religious and philosophical traditions. The book covers a wide range of topics, including ancient Egyptian and Hindu mythology, pre-Christian pagan practices, early Christianity, and more. In the Anacalypsis, Higgins explores the idea of a common origin for many religious and cultural practices. He argues that ancient myths and symbols, such as those found in ancient Egypt and India, can be traced back to a common source, suggesting the existence of a universal religious and philosophical system that predates recorded history. Higgins also challenges the traditional interpretations of religious texts, offering alternative explanations and translations. He incorporates various sources, including ancient scriptures, classical mythology, and historical accounts to support his theories. The book's significance lies in its attempt to present a comprehensive and comparative study of world religions and mythologies. It influenced later scholars and writers, especially in the fields of comparative religion and mythology. However, it is worth noting that some of Higgins' claims and theories in the Anacalypsis have been regarded as speculative and lacking sufficient evidence by later scholars. Is that always the case? While the book remains a valuable resource for those interested in the study of mythology and comparative religion, it is important to approach it with critical thinking and consider it within the context of its time. And we asked a question again of the narrator of this video: are you African, sir, or Jamaican? Great that you took your time narrating it, very clear with your accent. It's a heavy accent, much appreciated. Thank you very much. So we went online to look for this particular book and we found it. And there is a huge preface to it. And we're not going to look at it because it's very, very long, but it's basically about this author Higgins. He published this in 1836. It's quite extensive, it's quite a lot of information. So we could provide the link to it for you below this video, so you can go look at it at your own time, at your own pace. It's just a hell of a lot of information, and we're not going to read it all, or else we would be here all week or month. So we're going to try and get to the meat and potatoes of this particular book. Here's your contents page, preliminary observations, chapters 1 to, I guess it's in different sections, different topics. It's quite extensive as well, there's quite a lot of it. Preliminary observations, chapter 1. Really hard to see, it's so small. Probable origins of numbers and letters, and of the first adoption of the numbers. First adoption of the number 28 for the former and 16 for the latter. They both preceded hieroglyphics. Is that probable origin of numbers and letters? So this is where the numbers and letters came from. And of the first adoption of the number 28 for the former and 16 for the latter. They both preceded hieroglyphics. 1. In the following preliminary observation, the author has repeated much of what may be found in his work entitled The Celtic Druids, but it is so much enlarged and he hoped improved by additional evidence in its support that he had found it impossible to avoid the repetition to do justice to a subject. Therefore he hoped it would be excused, more particularly as he considered that the removal of all doubt respecting the antiquity of the 16 or Mayan letter system is necessary, several very important consequences being drawn from it, which have an intimate relation to the doctrines developed in the following work. 2. An inquiry into the origin of nations, or into the early history of mankind. One of the very first objects which offers itself to our attention is the invention of letters and numbers. Of this we have no actual information, to which the least attention can be paid, for the author, supposed no one listens to such stories as those of the invention by Hermes or Mercury in Egypt, or Hercules in Gaul. It is therefore evident that to theory, and to theory alone, we must have recourse for the solution of the difficulty. A bare probability is the utmost at which we can ever expect to arrive in the investigation of this very interesting subject. 3. There is no likelihood that man would be endowed with the sciences at his creation. Therefore it follows as a matter of course that we must suppose the knowledge of them to have been the result of his own ingenuity and of the gradual developments of his faculties. This being admitted, it surely becomes a matter of great curiosity to ascertain the probable line of conduct and the gradual steps which he would pursue for their acquisition. 4. After he had arrived at the art of speaking with a tolerable degree of ease and fluency, without being conscious that he was reasoning about it, he would probably begin to turn his thoughts to a mode of recording or perpetuating some few of the observations which he would make on surrounding objects, for the want of which he would find himself put to inconvenience. This, the author thought, was the origin of arithmetic. He would probably very early make an attempt to count a few of the things around him which interested him the most. Perhaps his children, and his 10 fingers would be his first reckoners, and thus by them he would be led to the decimal instead of the more useful octagonal calculation which he might have adopted, that is, stopping at 8 instead of 10. Thus 8 plus 1, 8 plus 2, 8 plus 3, and it goes on. There is nothing natural in the decimal arithmetic. It is all artificial and must have arisen from the number of the fingers, which indeed supply an easy solution to the whole enigma. Man would begin by taking a few little stones, at first in number 5, the number of fingers on one hand. This would produce the first idea of numbers. After a little time he would increase it to 10. He would, by placing them in order and making them into several parcels, by degrees acquire a clear idea of 10 numbers. He would divide them into 2 and compare them with one another and with the fingers on each hand, and he would observe their equality and thus be varying his parcels in different ways. He would begin to do what we call calculate and acquire the idea of what we call a calculation. To these heaps or parcels of stones and operations by means of them he would give names, and the author supposed that he would call each of the stones a calculus and the operation a calculation. 5. The ancient Etruscans have been allowed by most writers on the antiquities of nations to have been among the oldest civilized people of whom we have any information. In his essay, the author's essay on the Celtic Druids, he had shown that their language was that of the Latins, which was in fact the language in the latter time, was the name as the Sanskrit of India, was the same as the Sanskrit of India. And he talks more in this first chapter by the look of it. It's very, very small and very, very hard to see, even though we zoomed it. And he lists a whole lot of people and information here. Trying to find something interesting here. Some bishop who wrote, Bishop Doyley, saying, as has been already mentioned, this appointment of the 12 signs of the zodiac was probably a result of some advanced state of astronomy. Men must then have been not merely observers of the heavenly appearances, but must have begun to calculate and compare with some degree of science. Now we have every reason to know that many nations, the Chaldeans and Egyptians especially, were diligent observers in astronomy from very early times. They partitioned out the sphere into many constellations, noted the risings and settings of the stars, kept accounts of the eclipse, etc., and in many instances determined the calendar with surprising exactness, considering the means which they employed. But then these means were such as to show that they had made little or no advance in the science of astronomy, properly so called. Lalande mentions a number of particulars respecting the early efforts of the Chaldeans and Egyptians in astronomy, which seemed to prove decidedly that they had made no progress beyond rude observation, or they certainly accomplished in this manner more than they could have supposed. Among other things, he mentions that the Chaldeans ascertained the duration of the year by the very artificial method of measuring the length of a shadow of a raised pole. The Egyptians, too, settled their years merely by observing the rising and setting of stars. He thinks that latter have been unduly celebrated for astronomical knowledge because we hear of them only from the Greeks, who were comparatively ignorant. He especially calls the astronomy of the Egyptians very moderate, 600 years BC. All this shows that the science of the Babylonians and Egyptians was but the debris of former systems, lost at that time by then, as it is known to have been in latter times lost by the Hindus. And he's got all these footnotes underneath, references, etc. And what is this? Observations of the months, the years, etc. Something about the Hebrews. Number 33 here. Among the Hebrews, the name of this perfect number, i.e. 10, the perfect number 10, was Jod, or looks like a J, the name of God. Among the Arabs, it was Ya, Y-A, the ancient Indian name of God, as in the course of this work the author would prove. And among the Greeks, it was, it looks like an I, or L, the same as the Hebrew name of God. By the Etruscans, whatever might be its name, it was described by the X or T, and for the sake of an astrological meaning, the author had no doubt the Greeks contrived that the X should stand for 600, but relative to this, the author would have much to say hereafter. He goes on about Pliny and what he had to say, and General Valancy, and it looks like some Irish alphabet, column 1, column 2, etc. Ancient Irish alphabets, probably in the different languages: Arabic, Hebrew, Greek, and Irish. Would be a very interesting book to actually read. It's quite a lot of information here, but it looks very interesting. It's got up here 89. The Greek, the Hebrew, and the Arabic systems are evidently the same, though in their letters, from some unknown cause, a change takes place, and the powers of notation vary, but they do not vary till they get to the 19th letter, as observed above, where the hundreds begin, and in the mode of variation after it takes place, the name system is continued. From all this, the author was inclined to think that the old Arabic language, which he was going to show in, is really Hebrew, as all the roots of Hebrew and Chaldee words are found in it, was a language before the present Hebrew, Greek, Sanskrit, and Devanagari letters were invented, that the first system of arithmetic was that now possessed by the Arabians, though not invented by them in their present country at least, and that the inventors of the first alphabet made it of right lines and lines joined at angles, and called its component parts after certain names or numbers, which at that time, probably in the first lost language, had the names of trees, and that from this came all the allegories of Gnosticism respecting the trees in the Garden of Eden, held by the Valentinians, Basildaeans, Bardisanians, and so forth. Well, what we've found through Victor N. Alexander's translation project in the Brita, or Genesis in English, these Hebrews, there was Arpachshad, in the genealogy list, and he was considered the father of the Hebrews. And then he had a son called Eber, or Eber, E-B-E-R. In your modern versions it might have Heber, H-E-B-E-R, who, being one of his sons, had descendants who became the Awer, A-W-E-R, or Hebrews. So they're a group of people. Awer, in the footnotes, means they made a journey, they made a passage to probably cross a river or a land or whatever. It's not heavily detailed. Abraham was probably related to them because it mentions him in the genealogy list, and then he marries Sarah, etc., etc. Then he has a son, and they were commanded by God to leave the country of Ur of Chaldea and go to this land that he had promised them, the land of plenty, right? Canaan. So they made this journey, and that's what Awer or Hebrew means in the original ancient Tab Esher Ishana Tika Cypriot secret scribal language of God, translated into the nearest English equivalent by Victor N. Alexander, a Aramaic speaking translator from Mesopotamia, Syria. Okay, there's a lot of information here. Trying to find something that's interesting that we didn't know. So the origins of the languages, the numbers, etc., etc. If you're a linguist fan, linguistics, then this might be right up your alley. So this chapter 3, origin of the adoration of the bull and of the phallic and vernal festivals. So they worship the phallic. That phallic symbol, it had power, masculine power, etc. Which are those monuments you see all over the US, those pointy monuments, and you see it on the movie with Russell Crowe, Gladiator, in the background. Those are the phallic symbols. Those are probably the Roman version, which they probably stole the idea from Egypt or somewhere else. And down here, here's something. The reader will observe in the whole of the above quotations from Mr. Morris the style of the Christian apologist who is endeavouring to account for a disagreeable circumstance which he cannot deny, and to show that it is not inconsistent with his religious system. He will see that it is the evidence of an unwilling witness, and on this account evidence of the greatest importance, and the learning and talent of Mr. Morris are unquestionable, and it cannot for a moment be doubted that he would have denied the fact if he could have done it honestly. But in the teeth of the most clear evidence of its existence, that was absolutely impossible. The age of the world, flood, planets, and date of the week, and the moon. We did notice with the video here that the narrator actually said, we compared it, when we heard it, we compared it, or realised it was comparable to Victor N. Alexander's translation of the Brita, of the Aramaic, or the Genesis in English, where Brita, or Genesis 1:28 to 30, I think it was 30, like God had given the animals to the first pre-Adamic beings to use as a source for food. They were not to be eaten, really sacrificed. They're mainly a source for food, like their byproducts. And you squeeze the teats and out comes milk, and you make that into cheese, curd, whatever, right? Recipe of the day. This guy, the narrator, actually said the same thing within this video. So possibly the Aramaic manuscript version, which teacher originally came from when the Jews, etc., spent time as free men in Persia, and then maybe have adopted and adapted, say, that Zoroastrian sign, or they've adopted it from the Sumerians of the flying wing disc, and it's been adopted, adapted, and became the symbol of the Trinity, the triunity of Maya Allah, or God, the Son of God, Yeshua Mashiach, or Jesus the Christ to come, and the Holy Spirit, that Elohim, or above the flames. So it's quite interesting. There's quite a lot of information there. We can't read it all, obviously, because it's about 2 or 3 volumes apparently. But by the look of it, it's very interesting. You just noticed all nations have a tradition of the destruction of the world by a flood and of the preservation from its effects. Here are 2 questions. Of the affirmative of the former, no person who uses his eyes can doubt, but the latter is in a different predicament. A question may arise whether man existed before the flood above spoken of or not. Is that something to do with Jordan Peterson? Not Jordan Peterson. That other Jordan, where he says the Tohu and the Bohu. I can't remember his name. If the universality of a tradition of fact of this nature would prove its truth, there would be scarcely room for doubt in the... not very short that says. And the creation of man would be established. But this also thought, to the course of the following inquiry, we shall find that universal tradition of a fact of this kind is not enough by itself for its establishment. It appears to the author, or appeared to the author, that the question of the existence of the human race previous to the flood will not much interfere with his inquiries, but would, if it be omitted, only oblige him to reason upon this idea, etc., etc. The ancient records upon which Christians found their religion, as generally construed, maintain the affirmative, but no one who gives even a very slight degree of consideration to the circumstance of the Americas can deny that probability leans the contrary way. It is a very difficult question, but the author did not consider that it has much concern with the object of this particular work. Among the subjects to which the author alluded as being above the reach of the human understanding are liberty and necessity, the eternity of matter, and several other similar subjects. For our information of the historical transactions which it supposed took place previous to the catastrophe, that's the Great Flood, and it's the Ten Flood, which destroyed the ancient world, is very small. He goes very deep into these subjects. And the author supposed here that after man first discovered the 28-day cycle in the year of 360 days, he would begin to perceive that certain stars larger than the rest and shining with a steady and not a scintillating light were in perpetual motion. They would appear to him unskilled in astronomy, etc., etc. chapter 2. First god of the ancients, the sun. Double nature of the deity. Metempsychosis and renewal of worlds. Moral evil, eternity of matter. Buddha Genesis. He's got some vast information on that. The rise of the doctrine respecting the nature of God named above, it is said to be lost in the most remote antiquity. This may be true, but perhaps a little consideration will enable us to point out the natural cause from which, as the author has observed, it had its origins, like the discovery of figures or arithmetic, numbers and letters, etc. The septennial cycle. It probably arose among the first philosophers or searchers after wisdom from their reflecting upon the objects which presented themselves to the observation. That the sun was the first object of the adoration of mankind, the author apprehends. It is a fact. He says it's a fact, or said it was a fact, which he should be able to place beyond the reach of reasonable doubt. An absolute proof of this fact, the circumstances of the case put it out of our power to produce, but it is supported by reason and common sense, and by the traditions of all nations. When carefully examined to their foundations, the allegorical accounts or mythologies of different countries, the inventions of an advanced state of society, inasmuch as they are really only allegorical accounts or mythologies, operate nothing against this doctrine, and so on and so on. So there's so much information there. We'd like to spend all day, all week, all month, all year going through it. It's very, very interesting to us. But we'll leave it there, and you can, if you like, the cat just walked across the screen. Goodbye, Putty Cat. Click on the link below this video and have a look at it yourself. You'd probably have to have a good pair of glasses, a magnifying glass or something like that, or zoom it in so you can actually read this tiny writing. But we hope that you enjoyed it and it's been quite informative to you. If so, subscribe to our channel, give us a like, add your comments below the video, and we'll get back to you on those as soon as we can, and then share this video with all your family, friends and others. Ooh. 6. Of equal or nearly equal date and almost equally disseminated throughout the world with the doctrine of the Trinity was that of the hermaphroditic or androgynous character of the deity. It's like the Egyptians, a certain Egyptian pharaoh, maybe Aton, not too sure if it's actually him, but he took on this sun god belief system, and this god was supposedly androgynous, both male and female, and he married his half sister, a heavenly goddess. She became a heavenly goddess. So this king emulated him, and this religion was out there for a while until he died. His son took over or something like that, and people says, oh no, actually we're talking about the wrong guy. But yeah, it's something like that. He believed in this god, this mythical god, and so he married his half sister, apparently, and supposedly Arab antiquities, Egyptian antiquities curator who got accused of stealing and selling them to museums and stuff. He fronted up on one of his videos, documentaries, and says, "Hey, here's the box we found, and here's the children of this certain pharaoh who married his half sister. Look, they got club feet as a result." Very interesting. Equal or nearly equal date and almost equally disseminated throughout the world was the doctrine of the Trinity, was that of the hermaphroditic or androgynous character of the deity. Man could not help observing and meditating upon the difference of the sexes. He was conscious that he himself was the highest in rank of all creatures of which he had any knowledge, and he very properly and very naturally, as far as was in his power, made God after the being of highest rank known to him, after himself. Thus it might be said that in his own image and idea made he his God. But of what sex was this God? To make him neuter, supposing man to have become some grammarian enough to have invented a neuter gender, was to degrade him to the rank of a stone. To make him female was evidently more analogous to the general productive and prolific characters of the author of the visible creation. To make him masculine was still more analogous to man's own person, and to his superiority over the female, the weaker vessel, but still this was attended with many objections. From a consideration of all these circumstances, an union of the two was adopted, and he was represented as being androgynous, so he was both female and male. In the original ancient, very old Tab Eshet, Brita, or Genesis in English, in the translation project notes of Victor N. Alexander, he says that there is no neuter, something like that, and the Holy Spirit, Ruach HaKodesh, is actually referred to by Yeshua Mashiach, or Jesus the Messiah, Jesus Christ, as female. Most Western scholars, theologians, Christians, etc. say it. So who could be the better nurturer? Someone or something that was feminine, right? And we did have some World Church Society, Korean based, whatever, here come around and say, "Oh, did you know God was both mother and father?" And then we've heard these claims that the Hebrew god El had a wife called Asherah or something like that, and all this and stuff. Anyway, we'll leave it there. So if you enjoyed this video, found it very, very interesting, then subscribe to our channel, give us a like, add your comments, and we'll get back to you on those as soon as we can, when we can. And go share this with everybody you know, your family, friends, neighbours. Thank you for taking the time to watch this, our latest video upload.